The post was 15 words and a smiling photo, but it felt like a car cresting a cliff with me still inside. By the time the comments poured in, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. I'm Gordon Ellis, 72, and until 5 months ago, I owned a chain of neighborhood pharmacies in Phoenix, Arizona. Stores I built with sore knees, a used pickup, and the goodwill of people who learned my name because I learned theirs first. I came up from Hobbs, New Mexico, where the wind carries dust like a grudge, and a boy learns to count the price of things before he learns to spell them. We were tight on money and long on pride. My father drove rigs for 40 years. My mother stitched denim and watched the sky. You know the type of childhood. Bologna stretched with mustard, shoes a half size too small until your toes said otherwise. We're fine, uttered like a prayer over cracked plates. By 19, I was stocking shelves at a drugstore off Central Avenue, sweeping until midnight, learning the rhythm of pain relievers and prenatal vitamins and those little blue inhalers that meant a child might sleep tonight. At 27, I signed for my first lease with the kind of pen someone else would have used for a divorce. The landlord looked at me like a seasonal storm. "You sure, son?" he asked. "Sure," I lied. And then I lived inside that lie until it became a life. Elaine married me in a Lutheran church where the air smelled like lemon oil and old hymns. She had a laugh that opened rooms. When our son, Michael, arrived in 1986, I held him and promised out loud the things my father never had a chance to say. "I'll make it easier. I'll break my back so you won't have to break yours." I kept the promise the way a mason keeps a wall upright. One brick, then another, sleep be damned, holidays be damned. We reinvested every dollar. We skipped vacations. We drove a sedan so plain it might as well have been beige inside a beige. The stores grew. Customers multiplied. My hair went white. Elaine's hands got arthritic from counting register till, but she never complained. "Someday we'll rest," she said. "Someday is a word you whisper to your bills to keep them gentle." Elaine died 8 years ago, a malignancy in her pancreas that took her in the quietest winter I can remember. I still talk to her when the house is dark and the pool pump clicks like a metronome. After she passed, the stores were both my anchor and my excuse. The late nights became later. The lists multiplied. I told myself it was all for Michael. Michael grew up bright and impatient. He wore good sneakers because I bought them. He went to a private college because I paid for it. He graduated with a business degree and a certainty that the world should move faster, sleeker. He wanted e-commerce integrations, influencer campaigns, a subscription service called Refill and Chill that made me feel one step behind the times just reading the proposal. He married Natalie, smart, kind, and raised in a house with marble staircases. Her father, Dr. Stephen Carlisle, is a developer in Scottsdale, the kind of man who talks about Brussels the way we talk about Buckeye, like it's nearby and entirely manageable. At first, I mistook Michael's ambition for hunger that matched my own. But the tone shifted. He measured my decisions against Stephen's. My handwritten inventory logs became a joke. The neon sign in my oldest store became retro in a way that suddenly meant embarrassing. Our Sunday lunches went from ritual to optional to "I'm swamped, Dad." I told myself it was a phase. "They're building their own life," I repeated, like a hymn that never quite found its melody. Then came the photo. Michael and Stephen clinking champagne flutes at Ocean 44, both in sharp clothes, both bright with success. The caption read, "Happy birthday to my father-in-law, the dad I always wished I had." The words hollowed me out. I reread them until the letters blurred, until all I could see was my reflection in the black glass, a man whose calluses had become a punchline. I typed something I'd never imagined I'd type. "Glad you found a dad. I took your name out of the will." It wasn't a bluff. It wasn't clean. It wasn't kind. It was a man swinging back from his knees. I hit post and put the phone face down on the kitchen counter like it might bite. The day soured. Even the light on the tile looked accusatory. My heart kept doing that little skip that reminds you you're older than your thoughts. I drove to the oldest store on the west side and walked the aisles, touching the end caps I'd built with my own hands, the squeaky cooler door I always promised to replace. Customer said hello. Lydia, 50 years old, first employee I ever hired, asked if I'd been sleeping. I lied. When I came home, there were voicemails lined up like soldiers. Michael, Natalie, Stephen. My attorney, a friend from way back named Harold Kim, called twice. I let it all sit. The house hummed. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked and barked like the sky owed it something. Stupid post, I told myself. Silly internet drama. But there was truth beneath it. Calcified truth. The truth that my son admired a different kind of man, polished, credentialed, a conference room conqueror. I don't begrudge Stephen his polish. He earned it his way. But I felt replaced. Not just forgotten. Traded in for a newer model. The next morning I woke with a plan that tasted like metal. I drove to Harold's office. We sat in a room with glass walls and old diplomas. I told him everything. The caption, the slow drift, the way my voice had gone tight around my own son's name. "You don't need revenge," Harold said. "You need a lesson that sticks." "On him or on me?" I asked. "Both," he said. "Let's write something that saves a life, not just teaches a point." On the way back, I stopped for gas. The pump clicked off and I could smell the heat burning out of the concrete. I remembered the first time Michael rode with me to deliver a bag of medication to a woman who couldn't leave her house. He was 9. He carried the paper sack like it might explode. The woman cried when she opened the door. "You're a saint, Mr. Ellis," she said. Michael was quiet the whole way home. He asked if saints got overtime. I laughed so hard I had to pull over. I put the gas cap back on, got into my truck, and called Lydia. "You always wanted more kids to mentor," I told her. "I might have one for you." She made a noise that was half sigh, half laugh. "You going to tell him the pay?" "Minimum wage," I said. "And an education worth more than my whole portfolio." When Michael finally came by the house, he walked in with his jaw set like he was braced for a car crash. He asked about the will before he asked how I was. That told me everything I needed to know and nothing I wanted to hear. We argued. He called the caption a joke. I said some jokes carve people open. He said I was jealous. I said I was tired. He offered a public apology. I told him public apologies are confetti, pretty, and they melt in rain. "I'm changing the will," I said. "Not because you hurt me on the internet, because you've been walking away from me for years." His mouth opened, then closed. "How much?" he asked, like we were haggling. "You'll see," I said, "if you want to." That night I opened the old ledger I kept in the safe. Not the financial one, the other one. The spiral-bound notebook I started in 1982 when the first register drawer didn't balance by $19 and I couldn't sleep. In it were pages and pages of the mundane and the sacred. Notes on vendor accounts, a line about Elaine's laugh drawn like a heartbeat, customer names, a list of who got free antibiotics and why. I ran my fingers over the dents my pen had made, as if pressure could etch gratitude into paper. I added a new page and wrote in shaky letters, "What we owe each other. If you've walked this road with me so far, thank you. Tell me where you're listening from, your city, your corner, the street you know by heart. If this story feels like the life of someone you love, tap the like so it reaches another kitchen table. And if you want more stories like this, about work, blood, and the stubborn hope that families can still find each other, subscribe and stay with me." I woke before dawn, the house dim, the pool lights making the water glow like a hospital corridor. Harold texted at 5:41 a.m. "Draft ready when you are." I made coffee strong enough to sand wood and sat at the kitchen island with the old ledger open to yesterday's words. What we owe each other. The sentence sat there stubborn as a fence post. What do we owe? Not money, not really. Time, respect, the courtesy of showing up when you say you will. A phone call that isn't about needing a favor. I wrote those down like items on a receipt. At 8, I drove to each store, one by one. The surprise visits made my managers nervous and my customers smile. On 35th Avenue, Mrs. Hall asked if I'd lost weight. On Baseline, a tired nurse bought 3 energy bars and told me she'd slept in her car between shifts. I slipped a gift card into her bag and said it must have fallen in by accident. She knew better than to argue. "You're a softy, Mr. Ellis," she said. "Don't tell anybody," I replied. By afternoon, I sat in Harold's cool office with glass walls and a humming air conditioner. He slid a folder over to me. "I took what you said and designed something that doesn't punish so much as it insists." Harold was always good with verbs: insists, requires, offers. In the folder, a proposed foundation, the Elaine Ellis Fund, for medications and home health stipends for seniors in Maricopa County. 40% of my estate would seed it. Another 20 allocated to long-tenured employees like Lydia, prorated to years worked. The remaining 40 would go to Michael, if he fulfilled 3 years of frontline service inside the company. No title, no corner office, no consultant gloss, stocking shelves, working the counter, delivering to people who forgot what it feels like to be seen. "It's strict," I said, my finger on the clause about minimum wage compensation for those years. "It's fair," Harold said. "It says inheritance is a language, not a jackpot." We discussed governance, tax implications, board composition. I don't mind telling you that at points my mind drifted to Elaine's laugh. She would have approved of the foundation's name. She always wanted something of hers to keep helping long after she couldn't. When I left Harold's office, my phone blinked with 24 texts from Michael. One said, "Please call." One said, "We need to fix this." One said, "Dad, I'm sorry." I didn't respond. Not yet. Silence can be a scalpel. It cuts away the theater and leaves you with bone. Instead, I drove to Lydia's townhouse in Maryvale. Her little place smells like fried onions and lavender. The photos on the wall show birthdays and graduations I helped pay for without ever putting my name on the check. She made iced tea so sweet it could strip paint. 3 years, she said after I told her Harold's plan. "You think he'll last 3 hours?" "I think he has it in him," I said, surprising us both. She squinted at me over the rim of her glass. "Then I'll teach him like he's mine. That mean I get to yell?" "Within reason," I said. On Thursday, I met with our CFO, a quiet man named Peter, who thinks in spreadsheets but carries a rosary in his pocket. I asked for an audit. "All of it," I said. "If I'm leaving a legacy, I want it clean." He nodded. "Consider it done," he said. "One more thing. If Mr. Michael takes the front line route, we should set guardrails. He can't be doing photo ops every other day to make this look like a stunt." "Write the guardrails," I said. "Make them tight." I slept poorly for 3 nights. When sleep came, it brought Elaine at the far end of a grocery aisle, waving. I'd run, and the aisle would lengthen. I would wake with my throat raw from words I couldn't push out. Saturday, I sat in the bleachers of a high school baseball game, even though I had no one playing. I like the sound of aluminum bats and the way teenagers forget their phones exist once the ball is in the air. The smell of the concession stand, nacho cheese, burnt coffee, brought me back to Michael's Little League days. He was a catcher. He liked the job because it made him feel like he was running something. After one game, he told me, "I control the whole world from back here." I said, "Maybe, kid, but don't forget the pitcher's the one who still has to throw the ball." Sometime between the 5th inning and the 7th, I knew what I had to do. I had to say the words to my son face to face, in my space, with the ledger on the table like a witness. On Monday, I invited Michael over. He arrived on time, which felt like a negotiation tactic. He wore a pale blue dress shirt rolled to the elbows, a watch that looked like it had opinions. He stood in my doorway and blinked, as if hoping the house would sort itself into a version of the past he preferred. "I went too far," he started. "That caption was accurate," I said. "Not the dad you have, the dad you wish you had." He flinched. "That isn't what I meant." "It's what you wrote," I said. Silence swelled. He looked smaller than he used to, or maybe the room had grown. I showed him Harold's folder. I walked him through the foundation. I told him about the 20% to employees, the 40 for him if he earned it on his feet, at minimum wage, 3 years with Lydia as his boss. "You can keep your job with Stephen," I added, "and decline this. No hard feelings. You can take your future the way you see fit. But if you want my legacy, you'll need to carry boxes, sweep aisles, look people dead in the eye, and ask how their back is doing today. He tried to laugh. It came out flat. You want me ringing up toothpaste while my classmates from Wharton run funds? I want you finding your own face again, I said. And I want you to know the names of the people who keep the lights on. What if I screw up? He asked. You will, I said. And then you'll fix it. That's the job. He stood, then sat again. Can I think? He said, voice softer. You have 7 days, I said. After that, Harold files the changes, and I stop holding your place. After he left, I cleaned the kitchen like it had betrayed me. I put the ledger back in the safe. I walked the yard, pulling dead leaves from the orange tree Elaine planted the year Michael graduated. A neighbor's radio played Fleetwood Mac just loud enough to make my chest hurt. On day 3, Natalie texted a photo of a sonogram. We were going to tell you next week, she wrote, followed by a tiny pair of sock emojis that made me strangely angry because they tried to be cute about something holy. I stared at the ghostly blur, the new life announcing itself with a white flicker. I wanted to be happy without complication. I wanted the world to be simple the way the past pretends it was when you're not looking too closely. I put the phone down and cried into my hands until I tasted salt. On day 7, Michael came back. He'd shaved. He wasn't wearing the watch. His eyes were rimmed red like he hadn't slept or had slept badly, which is almost worse. I'll do it, he said. Not for the money. For you. For me. You'll do it for the people, I said, because I needed that part said out loud. For the people, he repeated, like a vow he didn't yet know how to keep. Michael's first day at the West Buckeye store did not feature a ribbon cutting, a camera crew, or even an extra donut. Lydia handed him a smock that smelled faintly of detergent and wintergreen. Put this on, she said. Name tag goes on the right. Smile goes on the left. Both matter. He looked at me like a swimmer standing on the cold end of the pool. You staying? He asked. Nope, I said. You have a boss. It's not me. I left, because sometimes love is an exit, not an entrance. I sat in the truck and let myself listen, just listen, to the sounds that had run my life. The beep of the scanner, the ding of the door, the murmur of lives crossing in fluorescent light. I drove away before nostalgia could make everything prettier than it was. The guardrails Peter wrote were simple and strict. No public-facing announcements about Michael's new role, no titles beyond associate, no scheduling exceptions, no social media posts about humility journeys. If anything leaked, it wouldn't be from us. Week 1, Michael stocked cough syrup and learned that cardboard cuts in August sting more than in January. He took a return from a man who swore the lotion smelled like a dentist, and he learned how to say, I'm sorry, without implying fault in a way that would trigger our loss prevention program. He walked prescriptions to cars curbside for people who couldn't stand long. He came home with calves sore from standing. He texted me at midnight. How did you do this for 45 years? I wrote back, by remembering who it's for. Lydia didn't go easy. He wants to go fast, she told me after a week. Wants to change the queue. Rewrote the way we shelve generics. He's not wrong about the logic, but he hasn't earned the right to preach yet. Let him fail a little, I said. Stay nearby. She snorted. I've been nearby since Reagan, she said. On week 2, a woman named Dawn, a regular whose laugh carries 3 aisles, came in short $20 on an asthma inhaler for her kid. Michael stood at the register, looking at the price, looking at Dawn, looking at the line. He called Lydia over. Lydia shook her head just slightly and said, What does the policy say? Michael swallowed. He'd read the manual. He knew the lines were drawn for a reason. He also knew there were ash-gray areas marked human. He rang her up, ate the $20 out of the associate cash error pool Lydia kept for exactly this reason, and walked into the back room where, Lydia told me, he stared at the wall for a minute like someone waiting to be struck by lightning. You did right, she said later, in a voice that didn't travel beyond that room. But if you make it a habit, we can't keep our doors open. I know, he said. I hate it. That means your heart works, she said. Now go face the next person. At night, he and Natalie came by with takeout. We ate on the patio and talked about anything but the stores until the food was gone. Then we talked about the stores until late. Natalie's pregnancy softened the edges of everything. The way she held her stomach when she laughed made time feel circular. "Have you picked names?" I asked one night. "We've been arguing about that like teenagers," Natalie said. "He wants something classic. I want something strong." "Both is possible," I said. "Elaine is both." Michael looked at me with a small, startled gratitude. "I like that," he said. "I like that a lot." On Friday of the third week, a shoplifter filled a backpack with cosmetics and ran. Michael chased him. Lydia screamed from the front, "No!" And Michael stopped short, because the rule is more sacred than pride. You don't chase, not for mascara, not for anything that isn't a threat to life. He came into my house later, shame prickling off him like heat. "I wanted to be a hero," he said. "Heroes pick up the phone and call it in," I said. "Heroes come home." Stephen called that weekend. "This is beneath you," he told Michael. I could hear Stephen's voice through the receiver, the way men sound when they're speaking from a mahogany desk. "We have a major project in Tempe. You are essential to it. This counterwork is theater." Michael put him on speaker. By accident or design, I couldn't tell. "Maybe theater is where I learned the lines I skipped," Michael said. "Maybe being essential to a Tempe deal means less than being necessary to a person who can't walk to the register." "Emotions don't compound," Stephen said. "Neither does emptiness," Michael said. Then he hung up, sat at my kitchen table and cried hard and ugly, the way a man cries when the scaffolding of who he thought he was has been yanked. I wanted to fix it. I didn't. I put a hand over his and said, "You're doing fine." That Sunday, I went to church for the first time in months. I sat in the back. I confess it wasn't so much God I'd come for as the singing. The hymn went, "Be thou my vision." I tried. Vision is hard when your heart keeps pulling you into the past like a magnet. At the store the next week, Lydia texted me a photo I still have saved. Michael kneeling to tie a little boy's loose sneaker, while the boy's mom held a bottle of children's ibuprofen and looked like she hadn't slept in 2 years. The caption said, "Boss, he's learning." I stared at that picture a long time. If I could have mailed it back through time to Elaine, I would have. She would have taped it to the fridge and bought a magnet shaped like a cactus to hold it up. Harold scheduled the formal signing for a Tuesday afternoon when the office was quiet enough to hear your own second thoughts. He wore a navy suit that made him look like fairness had a uniform. He'd invited a representative from the community health clinic we planned to partner with for the foundation, Dr. Aisha Benton, who moved through a room like someone who'd chosen usefulness as her hobby. Michael sat across from me, hair a little longer than it had been, eyes a little less glass. He didn't bring a briefcase. He brought a spiral notebook, which felt like an omen I was too superstitious to name. Harold walked us through every clause. The Elaine Ellis Fund would be governed by a board. Harold, Dr. Benton, Lydia, a rotating seat for a recipient of services, and one seat I would hold while alive and then empty by design, because I've learned how power sours when it's bottled. The 20% for employees would vest over 2 years to minimize chaos. Michael's 40% would transfer only after 3 full years of hourly work and 1 additional year of salaried management to ensure he could lead without forgetting. "Why add the 4th year?" Michael asked. "Because memory fades," I said. "The 4th year keeps it from evaporating." He nodded. "Okay." We signed. Harold set the fountain pen on a blotter like a relic. "Congratulations," he said, and it felt absurd. "Congratulations on building a complicated apparatus to replace basic human decency. But maybe that's what systems are for, to stand when our instincts falter." After, Dr. Benton lingered. "Mr. Ellis," she said, "I want you to know our mobile clinic saw 500 seniors last quarter who would have otherwise gone without meds. This fund will turn 500 into 5,000. It isn't charity, it's repair." "Repair," I repeated. I like that word. That evening I drove home slowly on Thomas Road, passing the old papier-mâché palm trees at a strip mall I've watched crumble and revive 3 times in 40 years. I stopped at a red light and the sky did that phoenix trick. Peach turned to gold, turned to something like the underside of a fish. The desert can make you believe in second drafts. I pulled into my driveway and found Stephen Carlyle leaning against a rental SUV, wearing contrition like a borrowed jacket. He straightened when he saw me. "Gordon," he said, as if we were already mid-conversation. I wanted to talk man to man. "About my son," I said. "I didn't invite him in." He nodded toward the street. "May we walk?" We walked. It was still 90 at 7 p.m. We passed my neighbor's agave, a mailbox wrapped in faded Arizona Cardinals decals, a kid on a scooter racing the dusk. Stephen cleared his throat. "I said something cruel to Michael," he said, "about this being beneath him. I owe you an apology for that." "You don't owe me," I said. "You owe him." "I'm saying it to both of you," he replied. "I've spent 30 years measuring men by the girth of their portfolios. It's a habit. Habits can be worse than sins. Habits are how we do sins without noticing," I said. He smiled, surprised. "You have a way with the backhand inside the compliment," he said. "I'm old," I said. "It's cheaper than therapy." He told me he'd offered Michael a fast track, equity, titles, rooms with long tables and bottled water with the labels removed. He told me he thought he was giving him an elevator. "But the view from there is boring," he said, surprising me again. "And lonely. The work your son is doing? It's messy. Maybe it's better. I don't know. I just know I shouldn't have called it theater." We stopped under the only shade on the block. A mourning dove watched us like it was bored by our little crisis. "There's a baby coming," I said. "I know," he said. His voice thinned. "I want to be the kind of grandfather who buys more than stock." "Then be him," I said. "No one's stopping you." He nodded, swallowed the desert air that dries your mouth no matter how much water you drink, and stuck out his hand. I shook it. His grip was solid. The rest we would learn. At home, I took the ledger out again and wrote, "Repair, not charity." Then, beneath it, "Men can change." Then, "I can too." The next morning, Michael was at my door before dawn. He held a Tupperware with scrambled eggs and a confession in his eyes. "I almost quit yesterday," he said. "A man my age told me I was too slow bagging his vitamins. I wanted to, I don't even know, I wanted to walk out." "And?" I asked. "And Lydia told me to take 10 minutes and count the overhead vents. Do something pointless," she said, "so you remember not every second has to be measured. Then come back and help me face the parade." I laughed so hard my ribs hurt. "That woman saved my life 7 times, I said. "Add that to the ledger." He ate standing up, like me. "Dad," he said, suddenly small and enormous at once. "What if I never deserve this?" "You never will," I said. "Neither did I. That's not how worth works. You just keep showing up until the doubt quiets enough that you can hear the person in front of you." By autumn, the air in Phoenix had the decency to cool at night. Michael had been on the floor long enough to stop watching the clock and start seeing faces. He kept lists in that spiral, names paired with needs. Alma, arthritis in fingers, loves peppermint tea, calls everyone baby girl, even the men. Mr. Cho hates the taste of his potassium pills, will swallow them without complaint if the water is cold enough to numb. Tammy, new mom, scared of the way her body feels like borrowed furniture. These are the sorts of notes you don't cover in business school case studies because they don't scale. That's the point. They anchor you to a scale that matters. On a Tuesday, a woman brought in an old prescription bottle with no label, just a smudge where a sticker had been. She wanted a refill of whatever her late husband used to take because it helped with the heavies. That's what she called his panic that turned his hands into birds. Michael listened, nodded, and said the only honest words there are when you don't know. "Let me see what we can figure out together." He called the clinic. He called the insurer. He called Dr. Benton's mobile unit. He found the notes. He found the dosage. He found the part of himself willing to stand inside someone else's pain long enough to learn its weather. That afternoon, a kid brought a science project into the store, a model of a lung made out of balloons and a milk jug. He was proud and smelled like glue. Michael put the model on the counter and said, "Teach me how it works." The kid did, with the annoying majesty children possess when they're not afraid of being wrong. When they were done, Michael taped a "display courtesy of local genius" sign beside the model and gave the kid a pack of gum like a diploma. If you want to know what a day in a pharmacy is, it's that. Breath that sticks, and breath that flows, and breath made of balloons. I drop by sometimes, an old ghost wandering the aisles. I tried not to interfere. I bought a roll of antacids I didn't need. I asked a new associate whether the receipt printer was jamming. "It is," she said, like I'd just asked whether the sun rises in the east. I showed her the trick with the lever that saves 10 minutes and 3 swear words. She looked at me like I was Gandalf. In the evenings, Natalie sat on my couch with her feet up on a pillow, and I felt the tick of her pregnancy through the room like a clock. We picked names when Michael was closing. "Elaine for a middle name," she said. "Strong for a first." "What does strong sound like?" I asked. "Ruth," she said. "June." "Nora." "May." "May," I repeated. It felt like an open window. Stephen's calls grew less frequent and more sincere. He asked about our foundation. He asked how to contribute without playing savior. I told him to show up at the clinic and sit, then carry boxes when asked. He did. He arrived unannounced one Saturday, rolled up his sleeves, and lifted crates like a man who had just discovered how heavy things are. Not everything glowed. On a Thursday, a prescription error nearly made it out the door. The kind you catch one step from disaster. Michael caught it. Barely. He came to my house white-faced. "I almost hurt someone," he said. "You didn't," I said. "And now you'll never forget what that almost feels like." We sat on the back steps while the sun gave the pool one last kiss. He told me he couldn't stop seeing the bottle. "I wanted to throw up," he said. "Good," I said. "It's the right reaction." "Do you ever stop being afraid?" he asked. "No," I said. "You just learn how to work with fear, so it makes you careful, not cruel." He nodded, wiped his face, and then surprised me. "Dad," he said, "I don't know how to say this in a way that isn't clumsy, so I'll just say it. I see you now. I see what you've been doing my whole life, and I'm sorry it took me this long." "You're not late," I said. "You're right on time." The next day, Lydia called to tell me she'd chewed him out in the stockroom for miscounting insulin pens. "I told him the difference between 1 and 0 is a life," she said. "Did he sulk?" I asked. "No," she said. "He listened. Then he made me a list of every diabetic customer by name and wrote their pen preferences. Boss, he's turning into a Lydia." "That's a promotion," I said. We fixed the squeaky cooler door that week. I'd promised that to myself for 20 years and never done it. The sound of the new hinge, quiet, confident, was like a joke only the store and I understood. Ultrasound day snuck up like rain in a dry month. We met at a clinic in Tempe with art on the walls that tried too hard. Michael squeezed Natalie's hand in the dim room. The screen shimmered. Heartbeats hissed. The tech mapped a universe I'll never pretend to understand. "That's a foot," she said. It looked like a lima bean. "That's the spine," she said. It looked like Morse code. "Do you want to know?" she asked. We nodded. "A girl," she said, as if she were handing us a weather report and not a future. Michael cried quietly, like a man learning a prayer by accident. Natalie laughed and cried and then laughed again. I stood very still because if I moved I might break into parts. After, in the parking lot where heat makes the air the color of bad decisions, Michael hugged me with the urgency of a drowning man finding Doc. "Dad," he said, "I want to name her Elaine." "May Elaine," Natalie said, locking eyes with me. "May Elaine," I repeated. The name fit in my mouth like a seed. That night I took the ledger out and wrote, "She's coming." Then, make room. Making room became a holy chore. I cleared the garage of tools I'd kept long past their usefulness, wrenches missing the bolts they once fit, paint cans dried to relics. I set up a crib in a spare bedroom and felt ridiculous until I realized I was building myself a promise. I will hold her here. I will rock her here. I will be better here. At the store, Michael floated through the day like he'd swallowed a small sun. He told everyone who came within 10 feet that he was going to be a father to a daughter. He fumbled bottles, he overbagged, he forgot lunch and didn't notice. Lydia, who doesn't suffer fools, allowed this. "Babies make fools of us all," she said, wiping a corner of her eye when she thought no one saw. Stephen texted a photo of a children's book and a simple line. "I want to read this to her someday." Michael sent back a selfie of his grin so wide it looked like it might tear, followed by, "You will." The truce felt tentative and true. We don't get to pick the order of those two. We take them as they come. I started walking mornings again, the same loop I used to run when my knees were less persuasive. The desert doesn't smell like much until it rains, and then it smells like forgiveness. One morning it rained. Just a little. The creosote bushes celebrated. So did I. I stopped under the same mesquite where Stephen and I had stood, and I said Elaine's name under my breath 3 times. Not a prayer. Not a spell. Just a naming of what still anchors me. The near miss from earlier turned Michael into a zealot for process. He reworked the double checks in the back room with Lydia's blessing, proposed a new layout for the shelves that kept high-risk items away from distraction points, and created a tiny culture of slow down to speed up. A sign above the workstation now read, "Hurry is a liar." He wrote it. He framed it. He meant it. At home, the pool light buzzed. I sat with a notebook for the foundation, sketching how our funds would flow. Vouchers, partnerships, mobile units, transportation stipends, so a $6 bus fare didn't become a barrier to a $2 refill. I called Dr. Benton and asked whether the clinic needed volunteers for paperwork. She laughed. "We always need paperwork," she said. So I went. I filed. I wasn't a saint. I made copies and felt useful in the small way that saves a day. One evening, around sunset, Michael came over with a deeper quiet in his shoulders. "Dad," he said, hesitating in the doorway like the room might rearrange itself if he breathed wrong. "I found a letter, from Mom, in the attic." He handed me a small envelope with Elaine's tidy hand. "Gordon, open when you miss me in a way that makes you puny." My knees went to water. We sat. I opened it. Her words reached across 8 years like she'd known the exact weather of this moment. "If you're reading this, you haven't forgiven yourself for something that wasn't yours to carry. Put the ledger down. Not everything you owe gets paid in dollars or deeds. Go outside. Look at the ugly cactus. Remember it blooms late. So will some people you love." We laughed through tears, as you do when you're being corrected by a ghost with excellent timing. "Mom was a poet," Michael said. "She was a map," I said. "I put the letter in the ledger between what we owe each other and repair." That felt right. It got harder before it got better, the way stories insist on real arcs. A supply chain hiccup squeezed insulin shipments, and angry patients became the day's currency. Michael stood at the counter as if he were bracing a door against a storm, explaining to frightened people why the thing they need most takes 3 more days than it should in a country that puts a man on the moon but can't put medicine in a hand fast enough. An older man named Rudy pounded the counter and shouted about incompetence until spittle flecked where Michael's name tag hung. My son didn't flinch. "I hear you," he said, not as weapon, but as bridge. "We have a limited supply in the back. I can sell you 2 pens today, and we'll call you as soon as the rest arrive. I can also walk you through some diet shifts that might make these 2 stretch safely, and I can put you at the top of our list." "You better," Rudy snarled, but his shoulders softened. He came back 2 weeks later with tomatoes from his garden and a sheepish apology. Natalie's blood pressure spiked at 31 weeks. The doctor prescribed rest, which Natalie translated into strategic acquiescence. A little less, not none. Michael became a nesting machine. He painted walls. He assembled a car seat using a YouTube video with 12 steps and a man whose voice made everything sound urgent. He installed a program at the store where expectant moms could pick up a small basket of trial-size items and a handwritten card that said, "You are doing something holy. Don't let anyone pretend otherwise." Lydia wrote the cards, her cursive slopes like desert hills. Stephen surprised us all by showing up every Thursday afternoon at the clinic with sleeves rolled, hauling boxes like a penitent. He didn't talk much. He just moved. The volunteers liked him and didn't care who he was. He seemed relieved. One day he asked me, "How do you stand the parts that feel like bailing a flood with a spoon?" I told him the truth. "You remember the face of the one person who got what they needed today," I said. "Then you go home and eat something warm." Crime spiked near the store in late winter. A kid barely old enough to shave tried to rob the register with his hand under his hoodie, pretending to be a gun. Michael pressed the silent alarm, handed over the cash in the drawer without ceremony, and asked the kid if he wanted a bottle of water. The kid blinked, took the water, ran, and was arrested 2 blocks later. Michael gave a statement. That night he shook in my living room like a man whose skeleton had been misplaced. "I wanted to be brave," he said. "I felt like a coward." "You were brave," I said. "You kept everyone alive." He looked at me like I was moving the goalposts. I wasn't. I've buried enough people to know the game we're playing. The next morning the staff came into a box of donuts and a note in Michael's handwriting. "Thank you for steady hands. A small thing. Small things run the world." Natalie went on bed rest. I set up camp at their house with a toolkit and a stubbornness that should have been a job title years ago. I cut fruit, I took out trash, I fetched ice packs. I watched my son learn the choreography of care, the way you fold a pillow so a back doesn't bark, the way you time bathroom breaks between contractions that aren't quite yet. In the quiet spans, we talked about the foundation. "Doctor?" Benton sent photos of the mobile unit, an elderly couple, arms linked, walking into the van with a dignity that made the air cleaner. We talked about the stores. We talked about Elaine. We talked about fear and faith like 2 men who don't use either word easily, but know when they're standing in their shade. Lydia called one evening to tell me she was promoting a young associate named Jazz to shift lead. "Girls got hands," she said. "Brains too." Michael vouched for her, said she sees the invisible work. That phrase lodged itself in me. The invisible work. The wiping, counting, noticing, calling, catching. The things no ledger credits and no headline prints. My life has been mostly invisible work. That used to bother me. Now it feels like a compliment from the universe. May Elaine announced herself with the urgency of the desert's first thunderclap in April. Labor began just after midnight, a tightening that turned into a choreography you can't learn until you're dancing it. We drove to St. Joseph's under a sky fat with stars. The nurse at triage had forearms like a farmer and a voice that made instructions sound like lullabies. "Breathe here," she said. "Rest there." Michael whispered apologies to Natalie for every contraction like he'd been personally responsible for tectonic plates. She swatted him fondly and told him to shut up and hold her hand. When the room filled with purpose and bright light, I stepped back and became furniture. Stephen arrived in a suit that he'd clearly thrown on in the dark, and he became furniture too. 2 old men in a corner, standing very still so the magic wouldn't notice us and change its mind. When May cried for the first time, I felt something in my chest unclench that I didn't know was clenched. The cry was small, defiant, perfect. She was smaller than my forearm and larger than the whole idea of money. They put her on Natalie's chest and the world sharpened until it hurt. Michael looked at me with a face that has only one word in any language: awe. An hour later, Stephen asked if he could hold her. He did, careful and reverent. He hummed something tuneless and old. "My mother used to sing this to me," he said, voice thick. "I don't know what it is. I only know what it feels like." "What does it feel like?" I asked. "Permission," he said, "to try again." We took turns with the chair. We took turns with the fear. We took turns with the joy until it felt like it might split us. When they slept, I walked the hallway and thought about the ledger. I thought, some entries are too holy to write down. Back home, the house rearranged itself around the small queen. There were bottles drying like glass flowers beside the sink, burp cloths draped like prayer flags, a diaper pail that announced itself like a new planet. I learned how to swaddle with more competence than I expected. I discovered my hands remember tenderness like a muscle memory. At the store, Michael returned from leave with eyes that had seen God and learned she was 6 pounds, 4 ounces. He built a small shelf near the pharmacy window with supplies for new parents. Nipple cream, gas drops, a handwritten list of late-night helplines. He called it Elaine's Shelf. Customers asked who Elaine was. He said, "My mother and my daughter," and then recommended a diaper brand like a sommelier. The foundation launched quietly. No press, just a newsletter and a soft ripple through the clinic network. The first week, 47 seniors received medication vouchers. 17 received rides. One man named Lester got a blood pressure cuff and called the foundation line twice to say thank you. The second time because he wasn't sure if the first thank you had counted. Stephen and I found our cadence. It was built on boxes, not speeches. We lifted, we sorted. We learned which paperwork questions gnarled most people, the ones that ask you to relive your scarcity so a computer can decide whether you deserve relief. We tried to make those moments shorter and kinder. At night, I wrote May letters she can read when she's 20, 30, 70. I told her about the way the desert teaches stubborn things to bloom, and how some apologies take the shape of work, and how a store can be a church if you let it. I told her about her grandmother's laugh. I told her about a ledger that isn't about balancing but about belonging. Summer in Phoenix is a dare. We accepted it, because what else can you do? The stores moved to summer hours that kept the staff from melting into the tile. May learned to smile in a way that made stoplights turn green. Natalie found her rhythm between feedings and naps and the strange isolation of loving a person whose primary language is howl. Michael wore exhaustion like a uniform, which I recognized as a kind of sacrament. The foundation hit its stride. "Doctor." Benton sent a graph I pretended to understand, but the numbers that mattered were the faces. A barber who kept cutting hair because we kept his statins affordable. A retired teacher who danced at her granddaughter's quinceañera because we delivered asthma meds to her door before it was too late. Repair, not charity. I said it often enough that it felt like a prayer I could believe. Stephen proposed something bold and simple in the same breath. A small clinic attached to our oldest store. Walk-in, low cost, staffed by nurse practitioners and rotating docs from the clinic. "We'll handle the build-out at cost," he said, "and if you'll let my company do it, we'll put the sign at half height so it doesn't shout." He'd learned something about volume. We met in the back room of the store that still smelled faintly of aspirin and old Freon. Lydia sat at the folding table like a board chair. "I don't care whose name is on the sign," she said. "I care if Mrs. Hall doesn't have to take 2 buses to get her blood drawn." That settled it. The build was a mess, as builds are. Drywall dust made my teeth taste chalky. A pipe burst once, because of course it did. Stephen stood in the muck with a grin I didn't expect. "You know what I missed?" he said. "Being on site when things go wrong and you fix them with your hands." "You can still do that," I said. "I think I will," he replied. The clinic opened on a Saturday with paper cups of lemonade and no speeches. People walked over from apartments and mobile homes and places I've been delivering to for decades. They sat in chairs that didn't look like punishment. They were called by first names. They were seen. Michael moved through the rooms like he was born for it. Maybe he was. A week later, we had our first crisis. A man in his 50s came in sweating through his shirt, chest tight, stubborn as a bull. He'd been ignoring symptoms for days because the copay looked mean. The nurse practitioner saw what needed seeing, gave him aspirin, called 911, and glared at the universe while the gurney rolled out. Michael rode along. At the hospital, they placed a stent. The man came back 2 weeks later with a bouquet of gas station flowers and tears. "You saved my life," he told Michael. Michael pointed at the nurse practitioner. She pointed at the system we'd built. I pointed at the air. It all felt true. That night in my yard, under a sky so hot the stars seemed bored, I felt a lightness I hadn't known in a decade. I could hear Elaine laughing at something small, a misdelivered pizza, a neighbor's dog wearing sunglasses, the stupid ache of how much we love the people we're given. I looked at the orange tree and decided to graft a new branch, something I'd been promising myself since before I learned the word widower. The graft took. It should not have surprised me. The desert likes audacity. Michael handed me a set of keys the next day. Store manager, he said, smiling too wide to be cool about it. Lydia clapped like thunder. Jazz high-fived him and said, "Don't forget who runs this place," and he said, "Yes, ma'am." The ledger got a new entry. We keep becoming. 4 months after May arrived, the desert pretended to be kind for a week. Mornings were under 90. The orange tree's graft put out a tentative leaf. The clinic's waiting room filled with a familiar patience that didn't sting. The stores hummed. The ledger grew heavy in my hands and light in my chest. I took May to the park at 7 a.m. so Natalie could sleep. The swing squeaked. The slide burned my palm. I held May and narrated the world in a voice I recognized and didn't. My father's tone softened by Elaine's smile. "That's a pigeon," I said. "It's braver than it looks. That's a mesquite. It pretends to be dead and then it isn't. That's the sun. Don't look at it too long. That's your grandfather. He's going to try very hard." Michael met us after his morning inventory. He smelled like cardboard and shampoo. "I had to tell Jazz I was wrong about the end cap layout," he said, sounding annoyed and proud. "She didn't even gloat. That's worse." "That's leadership," I said. "Abdicate the glory. Retain the blame." He made a face. "You really know how to sell it." We sat on a bench and watched May discover her fingers. Michael said, "I keep thinking about that caption, the one that started this mess." "Me too," I said. "I meant it like a joke," he said. "I didn't know jokes could be knives." "They can be," I said. "They can also be keys." He looked at me. I looked at him. He said, "Thank you for not letting me get away with it." We went to the store together later. We moved through aisles like men in a museum where the art happens to be toothpaste. We watched Jazz run a shift like a symphony. We watched a teenage boy buy condoms and blush purple. Michael rang him up without flinching and said, "Proud of you, man." Quiet enough to be private. We watched a veteran argue with the price of a blood pressure cuff and then accept a foundation voucher without feeling small because the language on the card said, "You've earned this." Stephen came by with a box of peaches from a farmer's market in a city too rich for its own good. He handed them out like sacraments. We stood in the back and ate with juice on our wrists. "I keep trying to say I'm sorry," he told me softly. "It keeps feeling like more words won't help." "They won't," I said. "These will." I held up the peach. He nodded. We chewed. Sometimes repair is fruit in a fluorescent room. That evening, in the house that still remembers Elaine's footsteps, I opened the ledger one last time for the day. The pages were crowded now. Names, notes, numbers, tiny drawings of the clinic van, a taped leaf from the orange tree, a scrap of May's hospital bracelet, a photocopy of Elaine's letter. I wrote slowly with the pen Harold gave me when we signed the papers. "Legacy is not marble or metal. It's repetition. It's a shelf-stocked right, a phone answered kindly, a pill counted twice, a hand steady. It's admitting we were wrong and then building what makes us right. It's a baby named for a woman who taught us to laugh while we were poor and proud. It's a son who learned to listen. It's a father who learned to let go." I closed the ledger and set it on the counter. I turned off the kitchen light and stood in the dark for a minute because dark is where gratitude glows best. The phone buzzed. A text from Lydia. "You still coming to the potluck tomorrow? We want to meet May." I typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." Then, "I'll bring the potato salad." She wrote, "Make two. These people are hungry." So am I thought. So am I. For work that feels like prayer. For family that feels like a promise kept. For repair, steady as a heartbeat, counted and recounted until the math becomes music.